Imagine waking up one morning and realizing the rest of your life has been stolen. Your name gone. Your freedom gone. Your future erased. All because of one thing, a crime you didn't commit. This is the true story of a man who spent 20 years behind bars, locked in one of America's toughest prisons, for something he didn't do. But when the truth finally came out, it shattered everything. He was innocent. But innocence doesn't always matter. His name was Marcus Reed, a 23-year-old mechanic from Detroit, Michigan. No criminal record. No history of violence. Just a quiet man trying to build a life. He had a girlfriend, a steady job, a dream of opening his own auto shop one day. But one rainy night in October 1999, all of that disappeared. A young woman was found dead just 2 blocks from where Marcus lived. Witnesses said they saw a black male in a gray hoodie running from a scene. That was all it took. Within 24 hours, police had Marcus in handcuffs. No weapon, no DNA, no motive, just a vague description and a broken system looking for someone to blame. For nearly 14 hours, detectives grilled him. No lawyer, no food, no sleep. They told him they had fingerprints, a witness, even DNA evidence. They lied. But Marcus didn't know that. By hour 12, he was exhausted, confused, scared. He signed a confession he didn't even understand, hoping it would all be over. The trial lasted only 3 days. 3 days to decide the next 20 years of his life. The prosecution painted Marcus as a violent man. The defense barely investigated. A single eyewitness, who later admitted she wasn't even sure, pointed at Marcus in court. That was enough. Guilty. Life in prison with a possibility of parole after 25 years. The first time Marcus walked into Jackson State Prison, he said it felt like stepping into hell. The noise, the smell, the fear, it hits you like a wall. He wasn't a criminal. But inside those walls, that didn't matter. The system had branded him one. His first night, Marcus barely slept. Every sound made him flinch: the footsteps in the hall, the shouts from other cells, the clang of metal. He remembered staring at the ceiling, whispering one sentence over and over again: "I didn't do it." But in prison, innocence isn't protection. It's weakness. It didn't take long for Marcus to realize if he wanted to survive, he had to learn the rules. Rule number 1, never show fear. Rule number 2, never trust anyone. And rule number 3, don't expect justice. He kept to himself, worked in the laundry, avoided the gangs. But prison has a way of pulling you in, whether you want it or not. 6 months in, Marcus was jumped by 3 inmates in the shower block. They said he looked at them wrong. He woke up 2 days later in the infirmary with 3 broken ribs and a shattered jaw. No one asked what happened. No one cared. For Marcus, that was the moment he realized he wasn't getting out. Not anytime soon. But something changed around year 5. A new chaplain came to the prison. He gave Marcus a book, the Bible. At first, Marcus wasn't interested. But when you got nothing else to hold on to, sometimes faith becomes the only thing left. He started reading every night. Slowly, he found peace not in freedom, but in understanding. He joined a prison study group, learned to mentor younger inmates, and began helping others file their appeals. The man they called the Quiet One became someone others looked up to. Then one day, Marcus got a letter. It was from a nonprofit called the Innocence Project. They said they had reviewed his case. And they found something, hidden deep in an old evidence box: DNA from the crime scene that had never been tested. For the first time in 19 years, Marcus had hope. It took months for the test results to come back. Marcus tried not to think about it, but hope is a dangerous thing in prison. Every night, he'd lie awake imagining what it would feel like to walk outside again, to breathe real air, to see the sky without razor wire. Then one morning, a guard came to his cell. "Reed," he said, "you've got visitors." When Marcus walked into that small visiting room, his lawyer was already there, smiling. "The DNA doesn't match you," she said. "It belongs to someone else. You're innocent." For a second, he didn't believe her. After 20 years of being told he was guilty, freedom felt like a lie. but it was real. On a cold morning in February 2019, Marcus Reed walked out of Jackson State Prison a free man. No fanfare, no apology, just a plastic bag of belongings, a bus ticket, and a world that had forgotten him. He was 43 years old. He'd gone in at 23. Freedom. It sounds beautiful until you realize you don't know what to do with it. When Marcus stepped outside those prison gates, the world looked the same, but nothing felt familiar. He didn't recognize the cars, the phones, even the people seemed faster colder. He had no money, no family waiting, no place to go. Just 20 years of lost time, and a record that said he was guilty, even when he wasn't. The state sent him to a halfway house for ex-offenders, men fresh out of prison, trying to rebuild their lives. Except Marcus wasn't like them. He didn't need to change who he was. He needed to remember who he used to be. But freedom can be cruel. He'd wake up at night, sweating, thinking he was still in his cell. When someone slammed the door too hard, his hands would shake. After 20 years of surviving, peace felt dangerous. Marcus tried to reconnect with his mother, who was now in her late 60s. They hadn't seen each other since his sentencing. When she opened the door and saw her son, her hands trembled. They didn't speak for minutes, they just cried. She told him she never stopped believing him, even when the world did. It didn't take long for the media to find the story. Man freed after 20 years for a crime he didn't commit. It was everywhere. News channels, talk shows, documentaries. Reporters asked him what it felt like, what he would do next, whether he forgave the system. He smiled for the cameras, but inside he didn't have an answer. How do you forgive a world that stole your youth? But here's where the story takes a turn. The DNA that cleared Marcus? It belonged to someone else, a career criminal named Darren Cole. Cole had been in and out of prison his entire life. The night of the murder, he was only 2 blocks away. Police had his name in the original investigation, but ignored it. When confronted with the truth 20 years later, the department called it a clerical oversight. Marcus called it what it was: injustice. With help from the Innocence Project, Marcus filed a lawsuit against the state seeking compensation for wrongful imprisonment. 20 years gone, 20 birthdays, 20 Christmases, 20 years of living in fear. But the state offered him $75,000. $75,000 for 2 decades of his life. That's less than $4,000 per year. Marcus didn't take it for the money. He took it for the principle. Because somewhere deep inside, he still believed justice should mean something. Outside, the world was unrecognizable. His neighborhood was gone, replaced by condos and coffee shops. His old friends had kids, families, careers. He didn't even know how to use a smartphone. In prison, time moves slow. Out here, it moves too fast. He once said, "I came out of prison, but the prison didn't come out of me." But then something unexpected happened. A journalist who had followed Marcus' story introduced him to a nonprofit helping exonerees rebuild their lives. They offered him therapy, housing, and a job training program. Marcus started working at an auto repair shop, again, the same dream he had before everything was taken. Every morning, he'd unlock the garage, smell the oil and grease, and feel human again. In 2020, Marcus stood before a state committee on criminal justice reform. This time, he wasn't the accused, he was the voice. He told them about false confessions, about forgotten evidence, about how a system built on punishment rarely delivers justice. And when he finished, the room was silent. For once, people were listening. Months later, Marcus met the lead detective who put him away. The man was retired now, gray-haired, slower. He told Marcus he'd just been doing his job. Marcus looked at him for a long time before saying quietly, "So was I. I was just living my life." Marcus started speaking at universities and correctional conferences, not for fame, but to make people understand. He said, "The system doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to care." His story inspired hundreds of volunteers to join innocence projects across the country. He turned pain into purpose. In 2022, Marcus went back to Jackson State Prison, not as an inmate, but as a guest. He walked through the same gates that once closed behind him. Guards who used to avoid eye contact now shook his hand. Inmates looked at him like a ghost who'd escaped. He told them, "I can't give you hope, but I can tell you it's worth fighting for." That night, Marcus stood under the stars, real stars, not the ones you see through steel bars. He said he finally understood something. Freedom isn't about walking out of a cell. It's about letting go of the hate that put you there. Marcus once said, "Prison taught me how to survive. Freedom taught me how to live again." He wasn't bitter anymore. Not because he forgot, but because he learned that hate is just another kind of prison. He started mentoring young men who had just been released, teaching them not how to avoid crime, but how to avoid hopelessness. He knew what it meant to be lost in a world that moved on without you. In 2023, Marcus gave a speech at a criminal justice summit in Washington, D.C. It was supposed to be just another talk, but this one hit different. He said, "I spent 20 years behind bars for something I didn't do. But there are people out here walking free, still trapped in systems that don't see them. Freedom isn't just walking out the gate. It's knowing the world believes your life matters." The video went viral overnight, over 10 million views in a week. For the first time, the man who had been silenced became the voice the world couldn't ignore. Soon after, Netflix reached out. They wanted to turn his story into a documentary, The Man Who Refused to Break. Marcus agreed, not for fame or money, but to make sure no one forgot what happened. He wanted people to see that behind every headline is a life that was almost erased. The film premiered to critical acclaim. Viewers wept, cheered, and questioned everything they thought they knew about justice. After the premiere, Marcus stood outside the theater, alone, watching the crowd disperse. A young man approached him and said, "You don't know me, but I was in prison too. Your story made me believe I could start over." Marcus smiled and replied, "Then it was all worth it." In the years that followed, Marcus lived quietly. He bought a small house near the edge of town, a place with trees, silence, and a sky wide enough for forgiveness. He started gardening, something he'd learned in the prison yard. He said tending to the earth helped him heal. Because when you plant something, you're saying you still believe in tomorrow. One morning, Marcus received a letter in the mail. It was from the daughter of the murder victim, the woman whose father's death had sent Marcus to prison. She wrote, "For years I hated you. I wanted you to suffer. But now I know the truth, and I'm sorry. My father's real killer can't hurt anyone anymore. But your story gave him no power left. Thank you for surviving." Marcus sat there for a long time, holding that letter. Then he whispered, "Now I can rest." On the 20th anniversary of his release, Marcus visited the same prison one last time. He asked to see his old cell. The guard on duty didn't recognize him, but opened the door. Marcus stepped inside, looked at the narrow bed, the small window, the walls that once defined his existence. He ran his fingers across the cold concrete and said, "This place broke me, but it didn't keep me." With the help of donations from his documentary, Marcus started a foundation, Freedom Reborn, dedicated to helping wrongfully convicted prisoners rebuild their lives. He hired former inmates as staff, therapists, counselors, people who understood what it meant to start from nothing. He said, "They took my time. I'm giving back hope." In one of his final interviews, a journalist asked Marcus, "If you could go back and change it all, avoid the prison, the pain, the lost years, would you?" Marcus thought for a long moment and said, "No, because maybe the man I am today could only be built in the fire of what I survived." That quote would echo around the world, shared by millions, printed on posters, and remembered by every person who ever felt forgotten. Years later, Marcus passed away peacefully in his sleep. At his funeral, the crowd was filled with faces, men he'd mentored, women he'd inspired, families of exonerees he helped free. The preacher said he may have lost 20 years of his life, but he gave the rest to giving others theirs back. Today, the Freedom Reborn Foundation still stands. Hundreds of men and women have walked free because one man refused to give up. His photo hangs in the lobby, a simple black and white portrait. No smile, just eyes that have seen everything and still found peace. This is more than a story about injustice. It's about what happens when the system fails, but the human spirit doesn't. Marcus Williams spent 20 years locked away for a crime he didn't commit. But he turned those years into something bigger than pain. He turned them into purpose. And if you ever doubt the power of one voice, remember this. It took just one man, standing against an entire system, to remind the world that truth doesn't die. It waits until someone's brave enough to speak it.